Okay, I'm live on this side, and hopefully I'm live on the other side as well. Let's see. Yeah, I should be. Okay. Now this is showing me one person, and on my browser, it's showing me one or two. Okay, so we'll wait a few minutes to see if anyone else comes in. This is Jeff. Just some housekeeping before we get started. Please follow me on X, which is Astro_Scoop, or Twitter. I'm also on Instagram, Astroscoop7. Those are the two main places to follow me. Instagram and X, also known as Twitter. And I do posts and reels and all sorts of links and all sorts of planetary examples, zodiac examples and signs, and examples with musicians, actors, actresses, and people from history, which are always in my live streams as well. So there's always examples. And one reason I do so many different examples is because a lot of times certain people feel that astrology is too general, and when you're describing Gemini or another sign, you're taking 100 different people and you're all saying that they're the same, they share the same trait. And by giving these more specific examples for the periods, it fine-tunes sun sign astrology, but it fine-tunes the overall astrology that I do, which is more than the sun sign, where we're taking the whole birth chart into effect. Karen says greetings as well. It's a little after 8 Eastern Standard Time, June 7th, 2025. And we have a lot of fun things to talk about tonight. There's a lot to talk about, and I'm going to try to go maybe an hour and 10, and we'll see where we go from there. But yes, I'm on X, Instagram. The weekly live streams are here, and continue to subscribe. For anybody, if you tell anybody to watch the channel, please have them sign in to their YouTube or Google account and subscribe with their channel or their name, and click all or personalized, just so you get notified. If you don't sign in, my videos will get a view, but the algorithm doesn't recognize it as active. It gives it more specific activity if you sign in and you comment, like, subscribe, share, all that stuff. So that's very important. So please do that. And most of my views, I've been saying this probably for about 2 months now, most of my views lately have been from the United States. So thank you, US, giving me about 30 or 40% of my views. And that continues to be the case within the last week or so. So it's very interesting, the ebb and flow of YouTube and where people watch our videos and live streams from. Because for a while there, I had so many different sort of esoteric and interesting countries, even smaller countries, that I was getting views from. So now it's back to the US. So it's always a good, interesting mixture. So last week we talked about Gemini 2, the second decan, and so we've talked about Gemini 1 and Gemini 2. Now today is the 7th, so we're still in the Gemini 2 period, which goes right up until the 10th, which goes till the early next week. And then we're going to be in the July, here it is, I'm sorry, not July, June, can't really see it, June 11th to 18th is Gemini 3, which we'll talk about tonight. And Gemini 3s are very, very interesting. And when I was doing research, I was coming up with so many different celebrity examples that I wanted to use. Actors, actresses, people from history, musicians. So I whittled it down to the ones I really thought scream people born between June 11th and the 18th or 19th, depending on the degrees. But this Gemini period we'll talk about tonight is the last full period of Gemini, and we have just under 2 weeks to go until the solstice. We'll enter summer and we'll get into the sign of the moonchild, Cancer. And it's hard to believe that the year is almost half over. And I just watched a financial webinar that I watched the financial webinar from this time last year, and then I just watched their updated new one. And they said the same thing. They couldn't believe that it had been a year since they said what they said. And same thing with me, with my live stream, my summer live stream last year, which doesn't seem like it's quite a year ago. So time is flying. It really is. And it's really, really important to grasp a lot of this current astrological energy, that some of it is fleeting and some of it is very, very long lasting, and hopefully not long suffering for people, sort of thing. It's like when I was watching the financial webinar, the finance guy was saying, no matter how bad your stocks are, your investments, and I'm not a financial expert at all by any means, but I have done a lot of research on my own. He was saying that no matter how bad a month or quarter you have, or the stock market has, there's so many other periods throughout the year and years that perform so well that people seem to forget about those periods and only focus on that 4-week or 8-week or 12-week period where your investments went down and you lost money, which happens to everybody, and it happens in all sectors. So it's just really interesting to sort of stay the course. And the astrological energy is like money, because it's fluid. So it is fleeting. There's long-term, investing in astrology. There's long-term investing, because even though your sign is almost gone, we're almost gone with Gemini, and then we'll be in Cancer, and then Geminis won't see their return until next year. There's still all that lasting alignments and all the lasting energy in your own chart with the alignments and the transits that's activating your Gemini planets or your Taurus planets or whatever sign that we're not in, whatever particular month we're talking about, and the other 11 signs that we're not in right now. So there's always a lot going on behind the scenes, sort of thing. But today's the 7th, and we're going to talk about Gemini. We're going to talk about the full moon coming up on the 11th, and the transits, obviously. And then maybe if we have time, I'll bring up a Gemini celebrity chart that we can quickly look at, that's from this current period. Because like I said, we're in Gemini 2 right now, and they'll be going into Gemini 3 next week, which is the full moon, the full moon energy, which is always interesting. And the full moon energy next week, what's really prominent that I'll circle back to in a few minutes, is Jupiter, the planet of expansion, which has been in Gemini for a while. Jupiter's finally going into Cancer. So Jupiter has expanded all the Gemini planets of everyone on the planet that has Gemini planets. It has conjuncted your Gemini planet, and now it's going to do that for Cancer planets and risings or midheaven, anywhere where it is in your chart. But especially for people that have Cancer that's prominent, especially Cancer rising people, that's going to be really, really, really important. Okay, so Astroscoop, this is Western astrology. I call it deep dive astrology or deep dive astrology coaching. My technique with astrology, or one of my techniques, is sort of unique, I think, compared to a lot of other astrologers, because I do Western astrology from a natal or birth chart perspective, but I also combine it with a coaching and a mentoring sort of bent, because I believe that the more empowered you are, not only being able to know and be more aware of yourself and aware of others, so that you can collaborate and get along better with others. But you can really uncover the strengths and weaknesses that you have and minimize those weaknesses so that you can bring out your strengths. That's really, really, really important. And it's funny because I see a lot of astrologers, we all tend to be biased in some ways. We are human, and we've learned certain branches of astrology, and we are biased. There's no doubt about it. So if an astrologer says that they're 100% unbiased, that's not really true or accurate. But when I combine my astrology with the coaching, it's really to give an overall big picture perspective on the energy and the signs and the strengths and weaknesses. Instead of some astrologers concentrate on all the strengths. Everything is so positive and rosy and perfect, and there's none of the dark side or the misfires. And then there's other astrologers that will focus on all the negative stars and constantly talk about all the negative stuff. So I try to do a balance. I try to do a little bit of both, because that's what astrology is, and that's what life is. Life is, light and dark, yin and yang, and it's all how we use our energy. It's not necessarily bad or negative. It's just how we use it. We could be feeling negative one day, and the question is, are we treating ourselves or others poorly in a lasting way? Does it last 2 days, 7 days, 10 days? Is it now a month that we're now treating ourselves and others poorly? And then that's different than having 1 or 2 days where you're not your best self, and you feel stressed or unhinged or whatever sort of thing. So astrology can really help. The astrology coaching part can really help uncover those strengths also and the weaknesses to balance that out. So the weekly live streams, I mentioned it at the top of the hour, are here. Tonight it's Saturday, but usually they're Fridays at 8 or 8:30 p.m. on YouTube at Astroscoop 3801. So please make a note in your planner or your phone that all my live streams are here on YouTube, either Fridays or Saturdays, anywhere between 8 and 9 p.m. And we talk about all this fun stuff. So Gemini 3 is June 11th to the 18th, as I mentioned. And so we're dealing with mercurial people, but now we have the addition of Uranus. So, you'll hear me mention, if you attended my live streams regularly, you'll know that I mentioned certain periods of the year and signs that are wild cards and can really go any which way but loose, depending on their upbringing and their values and, that sort of thing. And these Gemini folks born in the last period are absolutely some of the biggest wild cards in the whole zodiac, not only the 12 months, but in the, 40, 48, or 49 periods, not counting the cusps necessarily, but the true periods of the signs, the 1, 2, and 3, we're looking at over 40. And this is definitely one of the most kind of unpredictable and just purely restless and mercurial beings. And you'll know that if you've known anybody born between the 11th and the 18th. Now, one thing I wanted to mention before I get started in my comments, be getting a lot of comments where people will tell me their birth date, or if they might know their chart, they'll tell me their sun, moon, rising, their big three, and they'll say, I have this degree sun. You said I'm a Taurus 1, but I'm a Taurus 2. So it depends on the system, but it also depends on the year and the time, because you have to fine tune. If you're a 10-degree, 1050 degree planet, that's almost 11. So it's these are very, very close, these dates. And they're not exactly precise depending on the year and time. So that's why you need all that information to fine tune it. So someone born on the 19th, which is really a cusp degree, which we'll be talking about next, could still be the same degree as a Gemini 3 in the fixed stars. Could be very, very close there. So you have to take that with a grain of salt. So that's why it's good to know your exact time and your time, the time zone, have a time zone. I've seen charts where people will put in there the country and then the time zone or the time, but then they'll have the time zones wrong. So it's 1 or 2 or 3 hours wrong, maybe even more. And that makes a difference with the house cusps as well. So Gemini 3 wildcards. Gemini 3s, how do they differ from Gemini 2s from last week? Happy birthday, Gemini 2s, which we talked about. The co-ruler is Venus. And then the Gemini 1s, which is the first week, and all Mercury. So how do Gemini 3s differ? Well, Gemini 3s, I have not, this is another week where I have not known a lot of people in my life in a tangible way as far as their personality and their habits. I have a nephew. One of my nephews is born this week, and he's still relatively young, so his personality is still forming, but he is he is a wonderfully sweet and very energetic young boy. You know, most young kids are energetic, but my nephew, he definitely is showing some very, very sharp energetic traits of Gemini. So Gemini 3 is that last decan, and the degrees are going to be somewhere between 20 and 30, although the latter part of the 20s gets into the cusp. But Gemini 3 people are taking on a Uranus. They're taking on the Uranus co-ruler or Aquarius flavor. So when you think of Gemini being ruled by Mercury, and you think of the twins, Gemini, you know, any Gemini planet, unless it's really afflicted, blocked, or in a very quiet kind of house in your chart, Gemini planets are always putting a lot of irons in the fire. And that's especially true for this decan, or if someone had a late degree moon Gemini, Mars, and maybe even to some degree Gemini rising, although the rising is not a planet, but definitely Sun, Moon, Mars people. And the Gemini 3 people, the best word I came up with is seek. Now, we're all curious. We're all curious human beings. We're just built that way, or at least most of us are, that we seek certain things. We seek out new ideas, new people, new hobbies, new interests, new ways of doing our work or our hobbies. I'm always seeking and trying to come up with different things I can do for my videos or for my live streams, how I can keep my astrology fresh after, you know, learning and grappling with it for so long. But seek, they are seekers. And I mentioned early on when we started Gemini that Gemini is a sign that kind of likes to peek around the corner. And that's the early Gemini, that's all Mercury. But when we get to the Uranus influence here, there's an intellectual or ingenious sort of quality to these Gemini people that cause them to want to seek. Now, it's not necessarily seeking attention or acclaim, ambition, status, not so much all those things like some of the other signs. Astrology will tell you that, you know, Geminis just love variety, and they do. All Geminis love variety in Gemini planets, but this Gemini period especially loves the variety of seeking out different people, different venues, different scenes, and wants to seek, probe, and taste everything in life. And this kind of reminds me of Sagittarius, which is Gemini's opposite. So again, we talk about the opposites and the polarities in the zodiac, but Gemini and Sag are opposite, and which we're going to talk about in a few minutes on the full moon. But they're Gemini, the late Gemini energy, the probing they're taking on, so it takes that, oh, I want to peek around the corner and see what's there, see what's fun or what's going on. It takes that to another level, the way I see it. And like I said, I mentioned I haven't known a lot of Gemini 3 people, but when I was doing the research for the actors, actresses, musicians, and some of the movies I've seen them in and music I've listened to them or interviews I've seen, it kind of came clear to me that probing and that tasting of wildly different kinds of music or different kind of roles of the versatility. So it takes on the versatility of Gemini, which is any Gemini. Basically, most Gemini energy is versatile. And because it's not rigid, because it's not a rigid energy, it seeks to move fluid and probe and taste. And it's risk taking. That's the difference with this period. And I know I mentioned this, I think I mentioned this exact kind of scenario last year when I did my Gemini live stream last year, because I remember I had a phrase that had risk in it. So, but that is really the essence of this week, is risk taking. Now, that doesn't mean they're necessarily going to be a bungee jumper, jump out of planes, be a Formula One car racer, or a motorcycle daredevil. Not necessarily to that level, but the Gemini Sagittarius cusp, especially the later degrees, which are its more fleshed out part of the sign, absolutely wants adventure and risk. And that's also goes for Sag. So again, the similarity yet differences of each polarity. But the latter degrees in the 20s of Gemini is, and that risk might just be, it might be a lot of mental risk. It could be even someone that like writes a novel and writes a really crazy, wild, novel about people stranded on an island or something, or a horror novel or mystery or suspense that's just so way out there that in their lives they can't get that need satisfied, or they can't play that out without going to jail or being arrested or something, or something that's just not moral, so that they take to a medium, like music or writing or something, where they can get that adventurous, risk-taking qualities out. And it's funny because my nephew, who's born this week, my sister-in-law, his mom, said, he's really different than his brother, my other nephew, who's a Pisces. They're so different. And she said to us a couple of years ago, boy, I'm going to have to watch this guy. And she said it in a very funny way. But it's true. Like there's something very, like, he has this sparkle in his eye, out of all the kids, sparkle in his eye, like you just don't know what's coming, and mischievous. So I can't wait to see how he progresses. But yeah, it's Gemini 3 people. I always say Geminis are never boring, which that is a casual statement that pretty much any astrologer can make. I've never really met anyone with major Gemini that were boring. Geminis keep you guessing, and there's pros and cons to that depending on the situation and your age, where you are in life. A lot of that at some points in your life, that's fun for me to be around someone like that. At other times in my life, maybe not so much. So it really depends on the energy there. But that seeking nature can get them into trouble and hot water as well, because they're always not only peeking around the corner, but they're always seeking other worlds. And I don't mean necessarily getting on a plane and traveling to a remote island. I don't mean that, but there's a seeking or a survivalist kind of vibe there with late Gemini that wants to try everything. And wants to see, hey, can I survive on my smarts and my thoughts, my wits, and have some adventure. So that's very important, as I see it. Very important to this this Gemini period. 1 second, I just have to check the browser for a second. Okay, looks like we're back. We have 2 people. I'm not sure. I don't think it's really accurate. It says one says it's 2 people and the other says it's 1. So I'm not sure. But that's very, very important, is the seeking nature. Now, all of this can lead into hot water, as I mentioned, and late Gemini energy can be volatile. And it's not necessarily volatile in the same way a fire sign would be volatile. You know, like an Aries or a Sagittarius that loses their temper quickly and burns very fast. But then it's usually gone quickly, and there's not a lot of residue. With Gemini, it's more along the lines of their nervous system and their high temperament that can be high strung. So if a Gemini is strung very high, you know, like an instrument where the strings are too tightly tuned or out of tune, that Gemini person can become volatile in certain situations, especially if they're in an environment where they're taking on the colors of some other people in their environment that are not pleasant or not kind, you know, sort of thing. We're all sponges to some extent with the people that are around us, and that can rub off on us in either in a good way or bad way. You know, that's that whole thing that teenagers and college kids go through with peer pressure, being around certain company, and sometimes you do the wrong things or bad things, and then sometimes those people bring out the best in you. So sometimes it works that way too, depending on who you're around. People bring out a better part of you that you didn't see. So that's the type of people that I always talk about. It's very important for Pisces. When we were in the winter, I was talking about that with Pisces. But it's also very important for Gemini, because Gemini is the chameleon, very much a chameleon of the zodiac. So it is important for Gemini people, I think, to be around positive people, but genuinely positive, not positive in a, you know what I mean, like a sort of a forced or candy saccharine way where it's not natural, just a natural kind of positivity. And the interesting thing, here's another interesting thing about that seeking, the volatile, they enjoy, I put risky situations. They should reduce the tendency to get into risky situations, especially with adventure or love. And they should also enjoy under your nose. So that's kind of weird, right? Enjoy under your nose. That just means Gemini 3s, it would help you to enjoy what's under your nose, what's right here, instead of thinking, oh, I want to hop on a plane and go somewhere exotic because I need something stimulating and risky and exotic to seek, which maybe is okay in small doses, but could ultimately not be positive for you, sort of thing. So that's where a Gemini could become volatile. And when they're enjoying things that are not in front of them and they're always seeking other areas for fulfillment or stimulation, especially mental stimulation. So that is something Gemini 3 should be careful of. It's just to try to enjoy like what's right here. And sometimes you can make things thrilling or fun that is right here. It's not always over the fence or on the other side of a plane, sort of thing. So as I mentioned, opposing Sagittarius 3. So in 6 months, we'll be talking about Sagittarius 3. And this polarity for Gemini, the Gemini lesson, or one of the lessons, is to increase honesty and increase intuition, which I've mentioned before, and decrease coolness. So what does that mean? Increase honesty and decrease coolness. I'm not saying all Geminis are dishonest or liars. No. But the Gemini tendency to take the easy way out and maybe not want unpleasant situations and to live by their wits can put them in situations where the information they give or don't give, it can be less than honest. That's Gemini 3 has to be very careful of that, I think, and increase less coolness. So it's like if you had two Geminis together, two Gemini people, they might have a heck of a lot of fun together, but there might not be anything more than that, because they're both will have a coolness about them in friendship or matters of the heart, unless something else is strongly in their chart, a strong moon sign or a strong Venus that would balance that. But if there's a lot of air or a lot of Gemini, they're going to have that coolness. So that's not a bad thing, but it would be good for Geminis to decrease the coolness a tad and warm themselves up a little bit with some honesty, which isn't necessarily, if they're telling the truth, it's not necessarily going to box you in and limit your options. So another lesson, improve emotional honesty. So that's on the same lines as kind of telling the truth. So the emotional honesty, ease versus effort. And Gemini, Geminis have an ease about them often, even if they're high strung. Geminis can do things with an ease, learn things with an ease. Gemini is usually a sign that learns things very quickly and can emulate or mimic other techniques or methods or people. Gemini is a great mimic of energy and kind of, things like that. So, but the ease versus effort, do you want to put in the effort for something that's more lasting and that's valuable, or do you want to just have the ease, which may not be always emotionally honest? And this is more so for the younger set. This would be more so for people in their late teens to probably about 30, right after the Saturn return. So it would definitely apply more so to the younger set, which would be younger millennial, Gen Z, and etc. But ease versus effort is a big theme for Gemini, because Geminis generally don't like emotional messiness, kind of similar to Virgo. Things to be too, emotionally, suffocating kind of thing, which is vastly different from the next sign, which is Cancer, when we talk about the Gemini Cancer cusp sort of thing. And so the next thing is firm goals are needed. So that's something that I've seen. Now, again, I've mentioned that I have not known many people born between June 11th and 18th. I've known a lot more Moon, Geminis, late degree, Mars, Venus even, and risings. A lot of them, much more than the Sun in Geminis. So I'm going off of the Gemini energy by the degree, more so than actually knowing a lot of people born that week. And I believe in my family, I'm trying to think, I think aside from maybe one other cousin, I think my nephew, that's it. That's all we have for people in our family that I can think of. So, which is pretty amazing that I don't seem to know a lot of Geminis, and I haven't for a while. So I wonder why that is. That's interesting. July, August, that would be September. So the cycle would be September to June. Yeah, but the firm goals that are needed, that is very important, especially for the whole Gemini Sag polarity. And the Gemini energy can have, surprisingly, can have a lot of purpose underneath the sometimes superficial, silly, or kind of brainy kind of facade. There can be a lot of purpose. Geminis can surprise you with a lot of purpose with their ideas and when they put things in motion. But they need other signs there or other people to help with projects, the managerial, the confidence, the promotion, those other parts and kind of thing. Whereas if a person here, a Gemini 3, teamed up with a Sag, the Gemini 3 person would be really good with some of the more mercurial details. And then the Sag person would be the project person, the fire person that would be more the project manager and putting things into motion from a promotion standpoint, and a fiery to say, hey, look at us, this is what we're doing. And then Gemini might even be right by equals, side by side, or even behind the scenes, kind of ironing out some of those details in an air sign way, not so much in like a Virgo. but in an air sign way, in a social, the social constructs and kind of goals and ideas that they think people would want. So firm goals are needed. That's important. And the phrase I use is worthy projects. So again, not everything in life has to be profound or heavy or important. You know, life is hard. We often, myself included, trying to balance certain times in my life where I feel like I'm too serious or I'm too silly, or I'm not taking something serious enough, or I'm sweating the small stuff or taking something or some things a little bit too heavy. So that's life. It's a, you know, you're not going to always know the appropriate amount of weight on the scale. But with Gemini, if Geminis get into worthy projects, it can really, really be a good thing for all that energy so that they're not scattered as much. And that's always a potential, is the scatter. So firm goals, so flexibility within your steps of what you're doing, but then have some firm goals, even if they're really, really short-term goals, for the Gemini to say, hey, I'm working on 3 things right now. I'm flipping 3 houses, but in 10 days or 14 days, I'm going to at least meet this one goal, you know, kind of thing. Even if the other things are not, you know, not fleshed out, sort of thing. All right, so now let's look at the transits. Let's see, we're at almost 40 minutes in. So the transits we have, let me bring that up. Okay. Oh, excuse me. Having a really bad allergy night tonight. Oh my goodness. The air. Woo. So this is for tonight at 9 p.m., which is in 20 minutes. And here we're at 17 of Gemini. So for folks born this weekend, you're at 15, 16, 17, 18 of Gemini, which I talked about last week, and your sun is conjunct Rigel, or Rigel, however you want to pronounce it, which is a super, super bright, shining star. So that's really kind of cool. That's really, really cool. Really bright. And it's bright literally and metaphorically, right? It's literally bright. And I would doubt that there would be any Geminis born this weekend that were not mentally bright in multiple ways as well. So that Gemini sun has the Scorpio moon right here. So that's almost a quarter, or it's just a moon. It's the moon phase right before, it's the moon right before the full moon, which is the in conjunct, the Scorpio there. And what's interesting about this is a baby born tonight that has this sun moon combination of Gemini and Scorpio moon. That, to me, that's got to be one of the most difficult, probably in the top 4 or 5 sun moon combinations to have. And it's difficult in the sense that Gemini and Scorpio are so unbelievably vastly different. You have kind of one of the most serious signs and one of the most sometimes superficial, airy signs. And yet they both share a need to probe. So that would be one interesting thing that a baby born tonight would have. They'd have to reconcile this air and water, though. That's not easy. But that person will definitely have a strong need to probe. Mercury is still in Gemini. It's almost Cancer. Here's the Jupiter at 29. Like I said, in 4 days, it'll be in Cancer. And then bye to Jupiter in Gemini. Then it'll be bye to Mercury in Gemini. And then it'll get bye to Sun in Gemini. So Geminis, the energy's coming to a close for another full circle for all of you that have major Gemini in your chart, and Gemini risings as well. So that is and I noticed, I noticed some of the people I know that have Gemini rising, I've noticed their their energy lately, especially their mental energy. And it's been very heightened as these planets have gone right across their ascendant, going from the 12th house, which is a hidden house, which the energy is there. It's just kind of behind the scenes. It's like the energy is backstage. And then when it's the first house, it's like the actors or actresses coming onto the stage at showtime when the show starts at 8 or 9, and they're coming back from backstage. So the energy is there, and then it's shown. And that's kind of how what's happened for Gemini ascendants with all this Gemini. And it's come to that full circle. And of course, like I said before, that'll happen with Cancer ascendants, where Jupiter will come across there, Mercury will come across and hit your ascendant, the Sun will. So very, very interesting. We're going to have a lot. We're going to go from all this air energy, low on water and earth, and we're going to go to all this air energy, and we're going to go full on water. But the best thing I love about this right now, you'll see other astrologers that they probably talked about even today. This moon in Scorpio square, it hit before this morning, I think, Pluto in Aquarius, which is retrograde. And then, of course, any Taurus planets that were early that people have, it's squaring Pluto right now. But we're just talking about the transits. So when the moon goes into Taurus, the moon obviously will square Pluto when it's in the early degrees. Now the moon is away from Pluto, it's moving away, and it's getting close to inconjuncting this, and then eventually getting to be in Sag. But Venus has now entered Taurus, and Venus in Taurus is one of the top 2 placements for strength for Venus. Venus loves being in Taurus. She loves that. And while Venus in Taurus has some possessive tendencies, some negative tendencies, just like any Venus sign, the positive attributes absolutely outweigh any negatives. And I love when I see Venus in Taurus in any chart. It's just wonderful. It's one of my all-time favorite placements to see in any man or woman's chart, no matter how old they are, no matter where they are in life. And it just lends a good earthy balance to anything else that's in the chart. So anything in the chart that is too restless or too fiery or too intense, that Venus in Taurus is like, hey, it's going to chill. It's going to have a mellowing effect, depending on the aspects. If this Venus in Taurus it's not, but if it were conjunct this Uranus in Taurus placement, let's say this Uranus was 1 or 2 degrees of Taurus, these would be really close to each other. It'd be like right here. These would be conjunct. That Venus in Taurus wouldn't be quite as mellow because it would be hitting Uranus. It'd be more explosive and sudden. So it would have traits of Taurus, but it would manifest in a different way. So that's just a wonderful. This is just a wonderful time this next month to have Venus in Taurus to help out with, especially with the Pluto retrograde, all this air energy. We still have the Mars in Leo. We don't have much fire. We have the outer planets. Saturn is in Aries now, and we don't have any major Sagittarius happening. So, but we're going to have that Venus in Taurus for a few weeks, and then we're going to have all the Cancer. So we're going to get a little more like mellow, a little more touchy-feely in the cosmic sky there with the energies coming, everything there. And this, a baby born tonight, he or she would have Venus in the 4th, which is nice because that's a really nice. Venus in the 4th is a love of family, and would be express those natural Taurus qualities with their roots and their local family, and then they might have something opposite here, which is the public, but it would be most likely most likely that. But I'm really interested to see how this Jupiter in Cancer is going to affect the early Cancer people, the early degrees of Cancer planets, including the risings, because I think it's going to be, Cancer is an Earth mother energy. So male or female, it doesn't really matter. If you have a Cancer planet, that's an early degree. So I think that's going to be really, really interesting. Love gets, I put love gets steady. That's how love gets. All right, so let's see. I'll move that. All right, so now we'll talk. I think what we'll do is let me just see for a second. See, this is on the different one. Carolyn said, time is speeding up. Yes, it is. Happy Saturday. Okay, so I'm seeing some comments on one browser and not the other, but that's okay. All right. See if you can see if this one goes through too. All right, that one's still working. Okay. All right. So let's talk about the celebrities, and then we'll look at some more planetary influence coming up. So we have, these are all celebrities, Gemini 3s born between June 11th and 18th. And I may have the same people I had last year, but hopefully I don't have all the same people. My first pick is Chick Corea, and he was a unbelievable composer and keyboard piano player, synthesizer from Massachusetts. And his music is out there. I remember having a couple CDs of his when I was younger, and some of it I really liked. Other parts of it I couldn't even digest it. And I know part of that was because I was young, but it was also like just amazing, brilliant music, but also hard to reach or hard to relate to. So definitely a wild card, but very prolific. Brad Delp. He's one of the best rock singers in history. He was the singer who sang More Than a Feeling by Boston, which is in commercials and has been in TV shows and movies. And More Than a Feeling is an amazing song, although it's a little bit played out now. But Brad Delp's high notes in that song are just deafening. It's just amazing. The risk he took with his voice, and he was a very troubled guy, and we lost him young, but he was just amazing. Oh, there are 2 copies of your live stream. Oh, okay. All right, that's why. I guess it doesn't really matter. People can see it either way. I'm just wondering if it's different if someone signed into YouTube, if they're seeing both. If someone finds me on YouTube but they're not signed in, I wonder if they would see the 2 or just 1. I'm not sure. Oh well, that's okay. If we had more people, I could get some more feedback. So Brad Delp, amazing. Rivers Cuomo is a singer from the group Weezer from the 90s, late 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. And it's not some of my favorite music, but I mentioned him because he typifies, in a good way, he typifies kind of a brainy, nerdy, alternative pop rock front person for a band. He's just Gemini to me, and he's skillful and witty, and the lyrics are kind of interesting. And Gemini songwriters are always changing their lyrics, and they never do one record or one set of songs that are just serious or just light. There's always a blend with Gemini, and that's goes for Prince. Chick Corea's music is so complicated, but some of it is just very kind of fluffy and superficial. And same with Weezer, same thing. Neil Patrick Harris is a middle-aged actor from movies and mostly from TV series. And I put Neil on here this year. Haven't thought of him too much in the past as a typical Gemini 3, but I put him this year as he's getting older because he was in a show called A Series of Unfortunate Events, which was done for Netflix several years ago during COVID, and he was just brilliant in that as a kind of bumbling villain, and just so witty, funny, and he can make fun of himself, but he also does he's very sharp. There's something about very sharp about his acting and mercurial. So I think he's underrated. That's why I put him on here. I like him a lot. Tupac Shakur, of course, he was one of the epic 90s rappers. And he was more than a rapper. He was just a phenomenon and a huge hip hop rap personality. And he was definitely someone that did not like to be put in a box. If you watch old interviews of him, he absolutely got himself into hot water with some of the things he said, and there's some theories about that, how it took part in his life. But he was very prolific in the hip hop world. Alison Moyet, that's a singer you don't hear as much. You hear a lot about Mariah Carey. You hear Whitney Houston, you hear about Celine Dion and Adele. You hear about all those women, but you very rarely hear about people mention Alison Moyet. This woman's British. That woman can blow. Like, she was in a group called Yaz from the 80s, or Yazoo, and she did this kind of new wave alternative pop music, and very gutsy and strong. Strongly Gemini. I mean, she's just amazing. Some of the songs that she does, very underrated. Greg Rowley, he is a multi-instrumentalist, and he's been with all kinds of bands, rock bands in the 70s and 80s, especially Journey, and he's extremely versatile, an integral part of Journey. Greg Kinnear, that's another person in the past I never really thought of as a typical Gemini 3 period, but I saw him on a list, and I thought to myself, you know what? Yeah, I used to watch Greg on Talk Soup decades ago, and before he was kind of well known, and he's done some really good roles in movies that I think, again, are very underrated. I don't think he's great in every role, but he is versatile and sharp enough that when he does a role well, he does it really well. He played a villain in the movie The Gift. Hope I don't give that away. That was a long time ago, but that was one movie he was in. I think he was as good as it gets. So he's been in a lot of interesting movies and TVs. Paul McCartney, of course. You can't mention a Gemini week if it's Paul McCartney's birthday week. And while I don't think, my unpopular opinion is I don't think Paul McCartney is the greatest songwriter of all time, although I know a lot of people would argue with me on that, which is fine. He is amazing. He is talented. But no, I do not think do not think Lennon and McCartney are the end all and be all of songwriting. They were or are. They're great, and I respect their talent, and they influenced obviously a lot of people because they came out at the right time in the 60s. They came out before that British invasion. But Paul McCartney, he has a lot of poignant lyrics, and he did a lot of good work solo. To me, his solo work and his work with the Wings with his wife Linda is much more poignant than the Beatles' work. I like the Wings a lot. Very interesting, kind of 70s, 80s. It's pop, it's soft rock. There's a little ballad in there, but it's interesting music. It's got some of it has a groove to it. So I think he's really adept at putting together those different styles. So that's one thing as a Gemini 3, he's really good at. And I guess that was ended the list. I did have many others. Jupiter enters Cancer in 2 days. So put that on your list. And again, it could be any planet in Cancer you have, especially if it's a personal planet or rising, then it's monumental. But even if you have an outer planet in Cancer, you'll get the conjunction and a return, so to speak, from Jupiter in Cancer. So that's going to be interesting. And I think what I'll do is, since Jupiter will be in Cancer, obviously all this year, we have plenty of time to look at some celebrities that have Jupiter in Cancer, and see how that plays out. And then the stars, there's a lot of different stars for Geminis this week. And a lot of the stars say that there's an ease, like I mentioned, ease before with Gemini, and success, like Boy George from Culture Club, Judy Garland, Donald Trump, Prince Philip. These are all people that have this kind of brilliant, volatile Gemini energy. And whether you like them or not, they have an acerbic way. They're sharp and acerbic, and they have a way that can win people over, even if it's in the wrong ways. They can win people over kind of with their kind of nervous charm, and kind of know what to say in any given moment. So that's kind of a pro or a con, depending on how you look at that with the stars. But Bellatrix is one star, and that's in Latin. Bellatrix means female warrior. So that's how Geminis can be abrasive, is they can tap into that kind of female warrior principle, but I think it's more so mental. I mean, unless someone was a boxer or something, where you are physically punching another person, or a martial artist or something, it's usually metaphorical. It's usually a mental punch. And as we know, all those Geminis I mentioned, and some of these other Geminis that are born this week, are very, very sharp in their observations about society and criticisms as well. It's like it can cut both ways with a Gemini. So Bellatrix, that's another one, and it represents the chest cavity and the lungs. So again, I'm not a medical astrologer, but it might be good for people born near that star to not smoke, and to make sure that you're breathing and taking good breaths, either through yoga or exercise, Pilates or something, and just make sure that you're always breathing and hydrating the chest cavity and lungs. That's pretty serious sort of thing. Okay, so we're coming up on the hour. I know a couple of people have come in and out. Even if you come in for a couple of minutes, I appreciate it. And before I get to the next slide, just want to remind everybody to sign in to Google or YouTube. If you see this on the replay, please sign in and click all or personalized. You have to sign in for it to count. If you just watch my video, I'll get a view, but I won't get the subscriber. So please subscribe, comment, like, and share. I really, really appreciate it. Okay, so we're going to add, let's see. All right, let's see, I'm going to stop that. All right, share. Let's see what we have here. Okay. All right. Technical difficulties here. Bear with me for a second. Okay, doesn't seem to want to pop up here. Not sure what's going on. All right, hold on 1 second. All right. Okay, sorry about that. I don't know what's going on. A lot of difficulties here. I can't seem to get back to any of those pages. I had Ali Sheedy's chart, who's an actress born in 1962. I had her chart lined up to look at quick as a Gemini example, and I have the full moon chart, which we can talk about. So you're probably not going to be able to see this too well, but so this is the full moon Gemini. I appreciate your analysis of Gemini 3 to compare to the folks I know. Oh, great. You're welcome. Yeah, it really is interesting. It's really interesting. Yeah, it's always fun when you know multiple people that are the same sign and you can see those differences in them. Either sometimes they show more of the traits or even less, even if they're not on a cusp. So it's always interesting. Okay, so I apologize, we can't get the full moon screen, but the full moon energy here, let's see, we have the sun's going to be at 20 degrees of Gemini. This is on June 11th, 2:46 a.m. This is Eastern time, New York time. The moon will be 20 of Sag. That will be your opposition. Now, see, the good thing about having the full moon chart is this is the actual house. This is the real chart. Whereas if I was just looking up the planets for the day, like the ephemeris planets, I wouldn't necessarily have this. So this is really good because this, if a baby is born exactly on this full moon, the baby will have a late degree Aries rising. Here she'll have the sun in Gemini in the second house. The moon will be in Sag in the 8th, which is very powerful. Here's where the baby will have Pluto retrograde in Aquarius in the 10th. But here's Jupiter in Cancer, which it will be in. You can't see that. And then Mercury is also in Cancer. And then at this point, we're going to have basically 9 days left of Gemini after the full moon. So on the full moon, we're going to have all this Cancer energy that's already starting. And of course, Uranus will eventually get into Gemini from Taurus. Venus will be at 5 of Taurus. And then we have this the Saturn and Neptune, the Pisces node, and the Aries energy hidden in the 12th. And then we have, let's see, Uranus in the 1st. And then we have the Mars and Leo here, which is direct. That'll be going into Virgo soon. And that's in the 5th. But the sun, moon, I know I talked about this last year. I think I did a video on it as well. The sun, moon combination of Gemini and Sag. I've known a lot of people that have had these two placements with the sun and moon, and I've known both the flips. People with Gemini, moon and Sag, and then Sagittarius people with Gemini moon. And it's interesting to me because when I see this combination, as an astrologer, well, I see it one way as a person that I'm spending time with the person energetically, and then I see it another way as an astrologer. And the amount of restless energy that's contained in that sun-moon combo, a sun in Gemini that's an air sign identity, a mental identity that's strong on thoughts, and then the moon, which is the emotions, in Sagittarius, which is another sign that likes adventure, especially because it's a late degree. Another adventurous moon sign, one of the most adventurous moon signs, with a risk-taking late Gemini 3 sun. So that kind of restlessness is I mean, that person can get a lot done. You can cover an amazing amount of ground and all kinds of irons in the fire. Um, how many things land and stick? That's a whole nother ball game. But the combination of having the Gemini sun and the Sag moon is a lesson for us on the full moon to incorporate. For those of us that don't have strong Gemini or strong Sag in our charts, that could teach us to be a little more adventurous and take a little calculated risk in life and maybe try something new, especially because it's in mutable signs. And so it's not all bad. It's not all negative. If we're too stuck, if a chart, if I looked up a chart and it had no Gemini, no Sag, especially mutable signs, which I've mentioned before, but no major fire or air either. If it was all like Taurus or all Scorpio or strongly Capricorn, that chart would be so heavy that the chart could probably benefit from having some light, mutable, risk-taking energy to kind of balance out cautiousness that maybe never takes a risk, and because they're all have to be calculated for kind of some kind of end result, sort of thing. So seeking to see what's around the corner or peeking is good to a point. And then the moon in Sag is like the Gemini is the local part of the cosmos here, and then the Sag part is the far away part, the more far away lands sort of thing. So it's kind of like, do we want to travel local or do we want to travel far? So I imagine next week and going right up until the solstice, because that full moon energy is strong, and it goes through all. It'll go from Sag, and then you'll go to Capricorn, Aquarius, Pisces, and then of course when we go into Cancer, you'll have the Cancer new moon, Sun and Moon in Cancer. But I expect that travel will be incredibly busy in the next 2 weeks, and very, very. But the travel is the Venus of Taurus is a stabilizing influence in the entire chart here. So if you're looking at this baby born on the full moon, he or she's going to have Venus, basically Venus rising along with this late Aries. This late Aries rising is almost Taurus. So they'll have kind of a Venus rising. And this Venus will be square Pluto still, but it's moving away from it. And let's see, sextile Mercury and sextile Jupiter, almost trine Mars, not quite. So I don't see a lot of poor configurations here or overly tense. I just see a lot of energy. There's a lot of scattering of energy between all that Sag and all the Gemini. And then once the Sag moon, the full moon's over, after 2 or 3 days, it'll go into Capricorn, and then it goes to Aquarius, and then Pisces, it'll go into the next mutable sign. And by then it kind of evens out a little bit. But that's what's so interesting about the late Gemini energy and the late Sag energy, is it's so different than someone that's born on, let's say, May 25th or May 26th or 27th, like we talked about, which would be a brand new early Gemini person. And even a Taurus Gemini cusp person, I just had a cusp video, please check that out. Taurus Gemini cusp into early Gemini, it's all Mercury coming off of Taurus, and it's raw. So it's interesting to see the Gemini 3 period with a Uranus influence, and that kind of matches the star energy too, which is kind of how I think some of these ancient astronomers and astrologers kind of put the texts, when they translated the text, put these things together. Because at this point, so much has been talked about all this. People have written so many books and publications and articles. It's like, at this point, it's all open to interpretation. But there's little hints. There's little hints in these things. Like sometimes I was talking to an 80-year-old woman a couple weeks ago who's into astrology, and this is a woman I never met before. And I was talking with her briefly, and I told her I have a live stream. And she said, that's interesting. She said, I'm a Cancer. Maybe you could do my chart sometime. But she had her chart done maybe 30 years ago. So she remembered it. She had a very good memory. And she said, I never believed in it. I thought it was kind of bull. And I thought, people were just trying to trick people to make money or just pull a fast one on people. And I said, yeah, I know. I've talked to so many people in my life that have, and I've gotten readings from people that I felt were not very genuine. Some people are just out for a quick swindle or a quick buck. Some people are good at that. They're good at a quick con or something. It doesn't mean it's completely devoid of value, but for the most part, you can tell that their intentions are not very good. But she told me that she told one of her family members about her chart, and that the family member got mad at her because it was so accurate. She was like mad because it was accurate. She didn't want to believe it. The family member was like, I don't believe in this. How could someone know this about you from your chart when they don't know you? So people get mad sometimes because it seems like, I don't know, it seems like something dastardly or something negative. But it's all in how you use it. It's everything in life is how we use it. And if you use something if you seek to harm people with something, it doesn't matter what you call it. That's not good, and that will catch up with you. If you seek to influence people and share information, and then they can digest it and do what they wish with it, they can take the wheat and they can take a couple shafts and say, I'm going to use this. I don't really know what Jeff's talking about that part, but this part, not sure. But this stuff is great. That's fine. But people do get mad sometimes because astrology really hits. And when it hits really specific and sharp, it's like, how can someone know that? But it's kind of putting a lot of different puzzle pieces together. All right, so before we end, any of you that have seen my reels on Instagram, I'm always putting this. This is something I did for the month. I thought this was interesting, and it helps me kind of follow it as well. Venus in Taurus on the 6th, Mercury going into Cancer tomorrow, which I just mentioned. Jupiter Cancer on the 9th, the full moon's the 11th. And for Geminis, Saturn in Aries, which I've mentioned this before, the early degrees, you're getting a sextile, which is beautiful. That's a really nice thing. In addition to that trine from Pluto Aquarius, only for the early Gemini. And Libra, I know. There's always a lot of live streams where there's in the cosmos, there's often no Libra energy going on at all. I feel like I leave Libra out. Poor Libra, because there's often not a lot to talk about, but there will be in the fall. Saturn will be in the 11th in the solar house, where groups are a focus and lessons there. And then just a reminder, YouTube here at Astroscoop 3801. My live streams are Fridays or Saturdays, 8:30 or 9 Eastern Standard Time. Talk about astrology, the transits, planets, celebs, etc. And appreciate all the research you do. Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate you saying that. Yeah, it is a lot, but I love it. I love it. It's not arduous to me. It's I was so tired before today. We've had such a busy week and a busy weekend with school and one of my kids' school ending and all sorts of stuff. And my allergies, I was almost canceled the live stream again tonight because I was so tired. But then I started doing more research, even up to two hours before the stream. I was still doing the poster, and I was like, no, this is just too fun. Just too fun. So thank you so much. And again, if you catch this on the replay, subscribe, sign in and subscribe, please. Thank you so much. I appreciate all the loyal viewers. We're over 1,000 subscribers, so that's great. We're growing. And I'll see you next week. It'll be Friday or Saturday, not sure yet. Again, there's a lot going on in June. June's a very busy month. But happy birthday to all the Geminis that have had birthdays in the past week. Happy birthday. I hope you have good health. The solar return should heat up, give you some good heat. And then happy birthday to the last period of Gemini people coming up, including my nephew. And then next week we'll finish up Gemini, and we'll talk about the Gemini Cancer cusp. And in the meantime, if anyone has any recommendations, what they'd like to see in upcoming streams, do you want to see me do more profiles on celebrity charts where we look at the chart? Do you want to see more details about the transits? That sort of thing. There's only so much time in a week we can do it, and try to make the best of it. But thank you so much. Have a great night, and be safe.